Hi, this is Marian Stewart, and today I have my little neighbor boy George over.
Hi, Miss Marian.
I'd like to be called Mrs. Stewart. George is poor. I thought I'd make him some pottage. Poor people love pottage. Pottage was a staple food in the filthy Middle Ages. Normally it begins with a grain like oats, but this morning George didn't finish his kernel crunch.
That's Captain Crunch.
The next thing we need is vegetation. George, will you go see what you can find in the yard?
Yes, Miss Marian.
If I had any rotting vegetables in the fridge, I'd let George have those, but I always use polyethylene bags so my vegetables never rot. George, you didn't bring anything.
It's winter and I can't find anything.
You need to try again, George, and don't come back empty-handed this time. That attitude, you're going to be poor your whole life. Did you know in the Middle Ages there were lots of poor people like George? Famine was a constant threat because they never stored enough food for the future, just like George's family. Hey George, what did you get me?
I found this rotten cilantro in your neighbor's trash can.
Would you like to dump it in, George?
Okay, Miss Marian.
Don't waste any, George.
But it's rotten.
Beggars can't be choosers, George. George, did you know that in the year 1315, Europe experienced the Great Famine? There were crop failures and everyone was hungry. They had to eat farm animals. Do you like to eat farm animals?
We don't have any farm animals.
Maybe your parents should have thought of that. The famine lasted for 2 years, and old people stopped eating so that the young could survive. Once, even the king couldn't find a loaf of bread. Speaking of bread, George, you didn't finish your biscuit from last night, and you didn't wash your dishes.
I'm sorry, Miss Marian.
Call me Mrs. Stewart. We'll stick the biscuit in. The nice thing about pottage is that you could put anything in it, even this fat-free yogurt. I think it's past the expiration date, but poor people like George don't really mind. In medieval times, they would always keep some pottage boiling over the fire. Sometimes you would eat a piece of food that's been on there for months. But I like to use my West Bend slow cooker. George, can you go find me some meat? Do you know what meat is?
Yeah?
In medieval times, families like George's family didn't eat meat very much. One reason why there wasn't enough food in the Great Famine was that there were too many people like George. But the famine knocked down life expectancy to about 29 years. Oh, look what I found! I bet George would like it. All kids like bananas. Hey, George.
I found a dead squirrel.
How resourceful of you, George. We'll put that right in. Do you know what finally ended the Great Famine?
No, Miss Marian.
It was actually the Black Death. It killed enough people so that there was enough food for everybody else. Do you like the story of Hansel and Gretel?
No.
People abandoned children just like you during the Great Famine. That's what Hansel and Gretel is about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We better finish up our pottage, 'cause I bet you're hungry.
I don't know if I'm that hungry.
Here's a core from my Macintosh apple that I grew in my orchard. Here's some leftover ramen. I'm sure George has had lots of ramen. I'd like to make my ramen with fresh cut basil and green beans. Now we have to stir it up. Now I don't think that George could wait 2 weeks, so let's just cook it for an hour. George, where are you, George? Oh well, he'll be back. Oh well, that's the nice thing about pottage. I'll just plug in my slow cooker till he comes back. So today we learned about pottage and the Black Death. It's a good thing.